thank you for joining us again for our monthly webinar. My name is Leslie and I'll be your moderator today. As usual, we have a few quick ground rules to cover before we get started. We'll be keeping the phone lines on mute, but we encourage you to ask questions. If you have a question, please put it in the questions box, and we'll answer all questions at the end of the webinar. If for some reason we don't get to your question, we have your contact information, and we will write you back in an email with an answer to your question. We'll also be posting a video and a PDF of today's presentation on mceda.org. Actually, the presentation slides are already out there. If you go to mceda.org, under Resources and then Webinars, it's already listed under today's presentation. Our presenter today is Bruce Mackey. He is our in-house regulatory and incentive program analyst. He will be walking us through what to expect for Stage 2 meaningful use in 2015, including a summary of the objectives and measures. For those of you who don't know MCEDA, we are the Michigan Center for Effective IT Adoption. We're a program that is led by the nonprofit Altarum Institute. We were chosen as Michigan's official regional extension center in 2009 by the Office of the National Coordinator. We are one of 62 in the entire country. Our program is primarily funded through the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services and the Michigan Department for Community Health. We're here to help accelerate meaningful use of health IT in Michigan. To date, our group has helped over 5,500 providers with EHR adoption and implementation. Our program offers highly subsidized health IT assistance for qualified physicians under our grant funding. Paired with our fee-for-service offerings, we cover meaningful use support, security risk assessment, targeted process optimization, which is a hybrid of lean principles and best practice applications, and attestation and/or audit preparation assistance. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Bruce to get started on the measures.
Thank you, Leslie, and thank you everyone for joining us today. As she mentioned, I'm going to do a brief overview on meaningful use. I don't want to spend a lot of time on kind of the program basics. Most everyone on the line today has already gone through at least one and probably multiple years of Stage 1, so you're well aware of what meaningful use is and kind of what it is at its core. But I'll go through a couple of quick slides. I want to focus the majority of my time on talking about Stage 2, which is, of course, why you're here. And I have a lot of information to cover that I'm going to have to cover very quickly to get through in an hour, and I want to make sure that I leave some time open on the back end for any questions you might have as well. As you mentioned, if you have any questions, go ahead and put them in the question or chat box of the GoToWebinar interface. Kind of type those in throughout the presentation, and we'll address them at the end. And with that, we'll go through just a little bit of a kind of a brief overview of meaningful use. Kind of what is meaningful use as defined by CMS. It's using your certified EHR technology to improve quality, safety, efficiency, and reduce health disparities, engage patients and families. That is a big part of the big push in 2014, and definitely in Stage 2 as you come into 2015. Patient engagement plays an increasingly important role. Improving care coordination, also a major crux of the whole meaningful use program, and is a major part of Stage 2 and probably one of the most difficult pieces of Stage 2, as a matter of fact, which we'll touch on. Population and public health, and then maintaining privacy and security of patient health information. If meaningful use is successful, it will provide better clinical outcomes, improved population health outcomes, increased transparency and efficiency, empowered individuals, as well as a much, much more robust research data set on health systems. Everyone, I'm sure, has probably seen this graphic more than once, but just kind of give you the progression of the different stages of meaningful use. Meaningful use is right now a 3-stage program. Everyone is in each of the stages for a minimum of 2 years. Folks that got on the bandwagon early in 2011 have done 3 years of Stage 1, and if you exercised the Flex Cert option this year, you may have even done a 4th year of Stage 1. So, there's a few people that chose to stay in Stage 2 or were able to stay in Stage 2 in 2014, but the majority of folks are going to be heading into Stage 2 this year for the first time. And stage 3, the earliest anybody can start stage 3 is 2017. That got pushed out another year just recently. So, and the rules for stage 3 are not out yet. We should actually see I've seen some preliminary measures, but nothing's been finalized yet. But we expect that final rule fairly soon. Actually, we should be seeing what stage 3 is really going to look like pretty soon. So meaningful use timeline just kind of gives you a graphic on, depending on where you started, kind of where you're at now. So if you're just starting in 2015 here, again, you're going to be in stage 1 for a couple of years. Most people are somewhere in this group here, and maybe even started way back in 2011, where 2014 using the flex maybe would have quite possibly been a 1 instead of a 2 here. In which case you still have time to do the 2 years of stage 2 before you progress into stage 3. So a big question we get is, I used the Flex Cert in 2014. Now what? So the Flex Cert rule provided some flexibility based on a myriad of issues people had with their vendors and getting their technology in and whatnot. The Flex Cert rule allowed people to not progress into stage 2. And instead stay back in stage 1 for another year and possibly even use your 2011 certified technology instead of your 2014 technology. So just touch a little bit on what happens if you did use the Flex Cert in 2014. So there's just really, these are fairly similar depending on Medicare and Medicaid. There's just an extra caveat there with Medicaid. So in Medicare, the stages and years progress whether or not the provider meets meaningful use or whether or not the provider uses a different cert option in 2014. And in the Medicaid, in EP's 2014 attestation using one of the flexible options takes the place of the stage year the EP was originally scheduled to attest in 2014. So those are essentially the same or very, very, very similar. So if you use the flex option in 2014, if you were on the hook to be a stage 2 year 1 provider, but instead reattested to stage 1, this coming year in 2015, the EP will be in stage 2 year 2. So the program, whatever you did in 2014, took the place of what you were supposed to do in 2014. And so the program progresses. The only caveat there is in Medicaid, you can pause and not attest. So if you did not attest in 2014 in the Medicaid, the program paused with you, and you would pick up wherever you left off. So it only progressed and potentially skipped that stage 2 year 1 if you did attest to meaningful use in 2014. I hope that's clear enough. It's kind of confusing. Certainly ask any questions on the back end if I just confuse the heck out of you. All right, I want to spend the most of my time here, of course, on the stage 2 measures. Kind of explaining the difference between stage 1 and stage 2. So what does stage 2 mean to you? So there's it started in 2014, but really the majority of folks will be in 2015. We'll be starting this. Those that have met stage 1 for 2, 3, or maybe even 4 years are now on the hook to be meaningful users in stage 2 criteria this year. So stage 2 includes some new objectives to improve patient care through better clinical decision support, care coordination, and patient engagement. You'll see as we go through this that the majority of the menu items that were in stage 1 are now core items in stage 2. So if you were thankfully avoiding some of them in stage 1, you're going to be on the hook to get almost all of them as core measures in stage 2. And just like with stage 1, with stage 2, when it's successful, EHRs should save our healthcare system money, save doctors and hospitals time, and save lives. There's a lot of debate on whether we're achieving those goals or not, but that is neither here nor there. Summary of stage 2 structures, just to give you a graphic on the core difference between stage 1 and stage 2. In stage 1, you were working on 13 core objectives and 5 out of 9 menu objectives for a total of 18 objectives. In stage 2, you have 17 core objectives, so quite a number of more in the core objective category, but a few less in the menu. So you're only choosing 3 of 6 possibles in the menu objectives for a total of 20 total objectives. Do I need to upgrade my EHR? Most everybody has already done this at some point, or you're kind of in maybe still working on this upgrade. But in 2014, until the Flex rules came in, everybody needed to be up on 2014 technology. But I just wanted to, I've used this slide in previous webinars, but wanted to just kind of leave this in here just as a reminder that in 2015, everybody has to be on that 2014 version of your technology. You cannot achieve stage 2 if you are not on your 2014 cert. Your 2011 certified product does not have the capability to meet the stage 2 requirements. So everybody in 2015 has to be on their 2014 certified technology. How long is my 2015 reporting period? So as a core requirement of meaningful use, all EPs beyond their first year of reporting, so everyone who is beyond that stage 1, year 1 attestation, are required to report on a full year of data, so a full 365 days. Unless, so there is some pending legislation that could change things for us again in 2015. You're going to have to just stay tuned, but buzz on the street is that there is a better than 50% chance that things are going to change for us in 2015 again, and we are going to be back to a quarterly reporting period for 2015 as well. Kind of the same thing that happened this year, where there was even those that were set to do a year reporting only had to report on a quarter. It's looking like, although certainly not set yet, that we are going to have that option again in 2015. Like I said, there's some pending legislation. They're looking to tack it on to a must-pass bill. Some legislators around the state are basically going to force CMS to allow a quarterly reporting period. But like I said, that is still pending. As it stands right now, as of the day of this broadcast, we have to be ready for a 365-day reporting period still. So there's some things that you need to make sure you have in place by January 1st. Again, that could change. Stay tuned. We could know even within the next few days whether this changes or in the next couple of weeks. But as it stands today, we're stuck with a 365-day. What are the stage 2 objectives? So again, I already talked about the 17 core measures. There are 3 menu measures, and there are the clinical quality measures, just like you did in 2014. Get those 3 elements, and you are a stage 2 meaningful user. All right, so here are the actual core measures, the 17 core measures for stage 2 of meaningful use. I'd like to provide this graphic, gives you kind of a snapshot of what each of the measures are, as well as the threshold on the right-hand side. I'm going to go through each one of these as well. Over the next several slides, we're going to take a really quick look at them, and we're going to pull out just at its core what the objective requires, what you have to do to meet that threshold, and if there's an exclusion for that measure, it's going to list that as well. But just keep in mind that this is a very quick guide. This is I'm scratching the surface on each one of these measures. There is way too much information behind each one of these measures to pack into a single hour-long broadcast. I could talk for 3 to 4 hours on all this. So once you kind of have the program basics, I urge you to go to the Stage 2 Meaningful Use specification sheets. There's a link here for it, and this will give you most everything you'll need to know on each one of these measures if what I'm covering here is not enough for you. Okay, so on to the first one, the Stage 2 core objective for computerized provider order entry, CPOE. In Stage 1, we only had, the measure was only 30% of medications. In Stage 2, it increases that threshold to 60%, but then also adds labs and radiology to the mix, and each one of those needing 30%. So I want to pause on this one too and discuss who can do CPOE there was a very important clarification that came out just a couple months ago from CMS that I want to talk about here. It's regard to medical assistants. So in 2013, there was a program change that allowed for credentialed medical assistants to also do CPOE. Prior to that, the only people that could enter these orders were the EP, themselves, or a nurse, or maybe their RN or their LPN. In 2013, that changed, and they added credentialed medical assistants. The industry took the word credentialed and substituted certified. CMS has come back just recently and clarified that and pointed out that these are not the same things. Your MAs do not have to be certified MAs to do CPOE. They have to be credentialed. And all that means is they had to have graduated from a credentialed MA school. So in my area here, Ross is the school that most of the MAs in my area here come through. And as long as they have got their certificate to be an MA through that credentialed school, they can do the CPOE. So that is a big change. I know a lot of organizations have spent a lot of time, energy, and money getting their MAs certified. While it's great to have certified MAs, and I certainly encourage that just from a professional standpoint, they do not have to be certified in order to do CPOE. A credential, they only had to have graduated from an actual MA school. E-prescribing. From stage 2, this increases the threshold from 40% to 50% and adds the additional requirement that this 50% needs to be compared to at least one drug formulary as well. So as I mentioned early on, many or almost all of the stage 1 menu items have moved into the core category. If you remember, one of the stage 1 menu items was a drug formulary enabled. This is how they have moved that menu item in stage 1 to a core item in stage 2. They have it embedded now into the ERX measure. So again, the threshold increased from 40% to 50%, but then that 50% need to be compared to at least one drug formulary. So you need to make sure you have your drug formularies turned on. That functionality is a part of your certified technology. Recording demographics. Again, the only stage for this measure is in the threshold. It increased from 50% in stage 1 to 80% in stage 2. There's no exclusions on this one. Recording vital signs. In stage 1 measure indicated 50% of patients have height, weight, and BP recorded. The new measure increases the threshold to 80%. So a pretty significant bump, going from 50 to 80%. And just be aware of the different exclusions that are in place for this one now. So you can be excluded from recording all 3 of the vitals if you don't believe the vitals are relevant to your scope of practice, but you can also split them up as well. And so if just recording blood pressure is relevant to you, you can just use that one and exclude height and weight, or vice versa. If height and weight are relevant to your scope of practice, but blood pressure is not, you can just report on height and weight and exclude blood pressure as well. So, and then you can be excluded from recording blood pressure if you see no patients aged 3 or older. Smoking status. For smoking status, the only change again is to the threshold in this one, increasing from 50% in stage 1 to 80% in stage 2. And you can be excluded from this measure if you don't see any patients 13 years old or older. Clinical decision support. This one saw a significant increase in stage 2. So in stage 1, you only needed to implement 1 CDS rule. In stage 2, you need to implement 5 that are related to 4 or more clinical quality measures. as well as ensure that your drug-drug and drug allergy checks are enabled in your EHR. So drug interaction checks, the drug-drug and drug allergy checks, were their own core objectives in stage 1, but in stage 2, they've been embedded into the CDS measure. Because really, at the heart of them, drug-drug and drug allergy checks are really just CDS rules. And so there was some repetition, basically, in the measures, having both CDS rules and those as their own core measures. So this is another way that they've basically embedded previous measures inside of other measures. And so really you're looking at essentially 7 different CDS rules now under this one single measure. So you have to have 5 CDS rules that are related to 4 or more clinical quality measures, and then make sure that you have that functionality enabled for the drug-drug and drug allergy checks, and get screenshots of those to make sure that you can prove in your audit file that that functionality was enabled during your reporting period. Provide patients the ability to view online, download, and transmit their health information. So this is your patient portal. This was a big push in 2014. If you were attested to the 2014 version of Meaningful Use, if you used the flex option that got you all the way back to attesting to the 2013 version of Meaningful Use, you don't necessarily have your portal up and running, but in stage 2, you don't have a choice. You have to have that portal up and running. So the first part of this measure is the same as it was in stage 1 in 2014. Again, that really only applies if you attested to the 2014 version of Meaningful Use in 2014, not using the flex rules. And this was providing 50% of patients seen during the reporting period with online access to their health information within 4 business days of it being available to the EP. So again, that was the stage 1 measure, and it's still, that part is exactly the same in stage 2. But additionally, you'll need to show that more than 5% of your patients used your portal to view, download, or transmit their health information. So big question we get all the time is how can we force our patients to use the portal? So this is a tough one. There's no doubt about it. You aren't just providing patients that access to actually get into the portal and making sure that you have the data elements that are required available in that portal so that they can view, download, or transmit. But you also have to somehow coax your patients into using your portal, and you're on the hook for their behavior in this one. Thankfully, it's only 5% of your unique patients, but I know some have had some difficulty in that. My advice here is a lot of it comes down to how you are marketing your patient portal, the functionality you're offering in your patient portal, and really the kind of the overall how to put it, the overall sense for your patient portal. If you are presenting it to your patients as here's the patient portal and government's making us do this, they're not going to use it. But if you are presenting it to your patients in a positive light, and you are explaining to them why it is a win-win for everybody for them to be using this portal, and you are marketing it properly, and you are educating them on all the great things your portal can do, hitting that 5% is not going to be difficult. So look at your marketing, look at the way you're presenting it, make sure that you've got some of that key functionality turned on, like your prescription refills and your appointment requests. Those are great ways to get patients to access your portal and use it. So look at it as the positive tool it is. I know that it is a pain to get it up and running and get that workflow in place, but I'm telling you, the portals are a win-win for everybody. They're great for the patients, they're great for the providers, and they're great for the staff that are in between as well, when they're used properly. So in my experience, hitting that 5% is really not that difficult if you launch it and use it the way that you should be. Provide clinical summaries for patients for each office visit. For this measure, the threshold has stayed at 50%. This is one that did not see an increase in the threshold from stage 1 to stage 2. However, the time frame changed. So in stage 1, you had 3 days to get the clinical summary into your patient's hands. Now you only have 1 day. That's a difficult mark to meet. I know. I get it. I was a practice manager for 10 years, and I know how difficult it is to get your providers to complete their charts and close out their charts in 3 days. But you've got to get those workflows in place and push them even harder to get those charts completed in 1 day now. I know that's going to be a tough one. So you should start working on those workflows now and start educating your providers now and make sure they understand that they're going to have to close out those charts a lot faster than they were before, so that you can get these clinical summaries done. Also, just wanted to note, the clinical summaries can be pushed to your patient portal. This is a good way to also drive that 5% measure on patient portals. You do not have to hand the patient their clinical summary in the office or mail it to them. You can also push it to the patient portal, and that counts as it being delivered to them. And if you let the patient know that they can access their patient portal to get their hands on their clinical summary, you're going to help drive that 5% measure as well. Protect Health information. This is your security risk assessment, your SRA. There was no change in this objective, so it's exactly the same as it was in previous years. Everybody has to either conduct or review a security risk assessment. And no exclusions on that one. Incorporate clinical lab test results into certified EHR technology. So lab results was a menu objective in stage 1. It is now a core objective for stage 2. So here, 55% of lab tests ordered during your reporting period must be recorded in your EHR as structured data. Certainly the fastest way or the easiest way to get these results into your EHR is through a lab interface. But a lab interface is not actually required from CMS to meet this measure. The core of this measure is the data being in the patient's chart as structured data. So even if you do not have a lab interface or are struggling to get your lab interface up and running, you can key in those values into the patient chart and have it count. I also know that the vendors are not always triggering this one the right way. We get this questioned a lot, where we know there are some vendors out there that the only way it's triggering the meaningful use report to count in your numerator value is if the value comes in through the patient or through the lab interface. That is truly unfortunate that the vendors have taken it that way, because that is incorrect. The core of this measure is structured data. It does not matter how it gets into the patient chart, as long as those values are keyed in as structured data. That is what counts. So if you have to, you can measure this outside of your meaningful use reports. If you do not have a lab interface and you are forced to key in those values, which I know is time consuming, and if you are stuck with a vendor that is only counting those that come in through a lab interface, you can track these outside of your meaningful use reports and add them to your numerator. Just make sure that you're keeping proof of what you did and why you did it, and just keep accurate records of those in case you're audited. It'll be easy to demonstrate that you were not artificially inflating any of your numerators, and that you do indeed have the values entered as structured data. In that case, it is perfectly okay to step outside of your reports if you have to. Don't do that unless you have to, but you certainly can. Generate lists of patients by specific conditions. This measure moved from an optional menu item in stage 1 to a core objective in stage 2. You get to decide the condition that is clinically relevant or useful to your EPs, and then generate a report from your EHR of patients with that condition. That's it. Once you generate that list, you have met this measure. This is not a tough one in my opinion. I know most everybody chose this as one of their menu items in stage 1, and it is now a core item in stage 2. Identify patients who should receive reminders for preventative and follow-up care. I know this is another one that folks are struggling with in 2014 as well, but certainly in 2015 in stage 2. This one underwent a significant overhaul as well. So in the stage 1 measure, more than 20% of all patients 65 years or older, or 5 years old or younger, were sent an appropriate reminder during the EHR reporting period. Now in stage 2, we're targeting patients who have more frequent contact with you. So over 10% of patients with 2 or more office visits within the last 24 months need to be sent a reminder. This reminder should be sent by whatever the patient's preference is of the communication methods available. So this could be sent by snail mail, individual phone call, automated phone systems, or perhaps some other form of secure electronic communication, like through your patient portal. So this is another way that you can boost your patient portal access, driving that 5% measure, is by using that functionality that's built in with those interfaces between your EHR and your portal to send those reminders through the portal, so that the patients have to access their portal to get their reminders. It'll help drive that 5% as well. I do want to point out also in this measure that, so this is not appointment reminders. Just like it wasn't in stage 1, this is not reminding patients that they have an appointment next week. That doesn't count. It is reminding them, it could be reminding them to schedule an appointment. So for, say, PCPs, reaching out to patients to remind them that it's now time to schedule their annual visit. That counts. That is not the only type of reminder that counts. It is reminding them for really just about any kind of preventative or follow-up care. So think really broadly with this. You could remind patients for any preventative or follow-up care, but you could also be reminding them to follow post-op instructions. You could be reminding them to get a flu shot. You could be reminding them to get labs done. A reminder to, what do you need your patients to remember to do after they leave your office? Answer that question and remind them of that, and it counts. Again, I know that the vendors are not always in line with this with their meaningful use reporting, but as I've said before, it is okay to step outside of your meaningful use reports if you have to. If your vendor is not calculating something correctly, manually calculate it yourself, and you can add those into your numerator. So I know some of the vendors are only using reminders for to schedule a future appointment as the trigger, but that is, again, not at the core of this measure. It is a reminder for any type of preventative or follow-up care. So think very broadly with that. Is, what do I need my patients to remember to do after they leave my office? Send them that reminder, and it counts. So think broadly. Identify patient-specific education resources and provide those resources to the patient. The only change in this measure from stage 1 to stage 2 was to move it from a menu objective that you could choose to do to a core objective that you now must do. So the ability to recommend educational resources to your patients with the help of your EHR is one of the certification requirements that dictates your EHR, that EHR upgrade going from 2011 to 2014 certification. So you're, if you avoided this one in stage 1, you can't in stage 2. But at its core, all it is as your EPs are charting along, entering data in the patient's chart, your EHR is looking at what information is being entered, and it is somewhere in there. You might have to find where it's embedded, but if it's a 2014 certified product, it's in there. It is recommending patient educational resources. For instance, if you check off in demographics that if you check off that they're a smoker, I almost guarantee that your EHR is going to recommend some smoking cessation education materials. Print those out, and you've met the measure. You just print out whatever it is that the EHR is recommending, and you will get credit for it in this measure. You do not have to use the education materials that are embedded in your EHR. You can use, if you've got that smoking cessation information packet that you've used since 1977 and you want to keep using that, you certainly still can and get credit for it. But again, as long as it is the EHR that is recommending that education material, and then you are providing either what's embedded in your EHR, what's being offered from your EHR, or a version of it that you have if you want to use an alternative version. And there's no exclusions, or the only exclusion on this is if you have no office visits during the reporting period. Perform MedRec. Again, for this measure, the only change was to move it from an optional menu objective to a mandatory core objective. So for more than 50% of patients transitioned into your care, you must perform a medication reconciliation, comparing the med list you received from the patient, hospital, or other provider against the information in your own EHR. One moment. Seen all of the questions that are pouring in already. Yep, keep those questions coming, and we will address as many of them as we can at the end. And if I don't get to all the questions, we'll answer them individually as well after the broadcast. Provide summary of care record for each transition of care or referral. So again, this measure moved from a menu measure in stage 1 to a core in stage 2. But the requirements are also now expanded in this measure. So under stage 1, only measure 1 was included, which indicated that you must provide a summary of care record for more than 50% of transitions of care and referrals. As you can see, there are now 2 additional measure requirements for this objective. And I know this is, I dare say, the most difficult measure to reach in stage 2. And this is why a majority of stage 2ers in 2014 used the flex cert options and reattested to stage 1 because of this single measure, because it is a tough one. So in measure 2, 10% of the transitions of care must be electronically transmitted via your EHR. So that's using the certified direct transport technology that's embedded into it, or through an eHealth exchange participant, which is a health information exchange, or an HIE. Although, unfortunately, the certification for that is lagging, and none of the HIEs in Michigan are eHealth exchange participants yet. So while that caveat is there, there's technically 2 different transport mechanisms that you can use, and that's the direct technology, which is really just a secure email going from your EHR to another EHR. That's what direct is. There is technically this other option, which is bouncing your transition of care documents, your CCD documents, through an HIE and having them deliver it. The problem is there's some red tape in the way there. That the HIEs, while they have that backbone and they have that structure and they have that capability to do that transport, and in my opinion, they can do it a lot better and a lot easier and a lot faster than the whole direct mess. They're not allowed to use that yet and have it count for meaningful use. The thorn in my side, and no doubt a thorn in everyone's side, that there's a much better way to go about transmitting these, but they can't quite use that new technology yet that's there. So most of the time, everyone is stuck with using direct or some form of direct, which can be kind of messy. So additionally, in the third part of this message, either one or more of those exchanges must be with the recipient who has a different EHR system than you, or you must conduct one or more successful tests with the CMS designated test EHR during your reporting period. That is something called the randomizer, which I think is a hilarious name for this. I don't know how they chose the randomizer for that, but it might be kind of fitting. Seems kind of random. So you don't have to go that route if you are sending when you're transporting via direct. If one of those transitions of care are to somebody who has a different EHR than you, then you've automatically hit the measure 3 on this. So just take a look at who your referring providers are and find, and what their vendor is. If one of them is, if you're using NextGen and they're using Epic or whatever, then by doing that, it counts in measure 2 and measure 3. But yeah, I know this is a really tough one. Folks are going to struggle, and if you have not started to dive into getting this one figured out, you need to get on this one as soon as you can, because this one's going to provide the biggest headache for folks in stage 2, is meeting this objective. Provide the summary of care record for each transition of care or referral continued. So yeah, this one was so big that in the previous one I only could show you what the measure requires. This one has the other 2 boxes of what it means to you, and as well as the exclusions. So so again, over half the patients you refer to, if you refer to another provider or transfer to another setting of care, like to a nursing home, for instance, you have to send that provider the next provider either an electronic copy of summary of care, or it can be that can also be a paper. It can be delivered by the patient in that instance, so that 50% one isn't that difficult to meet, because it doesn't matter how it gets to that next provider of care, whether it's electronic or in paper or fax or however you get it to them. It's the next 2 that are difficult, where 10% of those transitions of care must be done electronically, and then one of them you have to ensure is done with a different vendor, or with a provider who has a different vendor. You can be excluded from this measure if you transfer a patient to another setting or refer a patient to another provider less than 100 times during the reporting period. So this is where I think the pending legislation that I hope is going to provide some relief in 2015 and go from the 365-day reporting period back down to a quarterly reporting period. For under 365 days, it might be very difficult to claim the exclusion on this one, but in a quarterly reporting period, you might have an easier time staying under that 100 transition of care threshold, and you might be able to just claim the exclusion on this one. Submit electronic data to immunization registries. So this is MICR. This was a menu item in stage 1, is now a core item in stage 2. So in stage 1, you had the option to test your EHR's ability to electronically transmit this information to a public health registry. Now in stage 2, successful transmission of this data on a continuing basis is mandatory unless you're excluded for any of these listed reasons. I'm going to touch a little bit in just a few slides on the public health measures. There's a big push for the public health measures going from stage 1 to stage 2. But there's some interesting things. There's some things you really need to be aware of with the public health measures. So I have a couple of slides, just a few minutes here on those. Using secure electronic messaging to communicate with patients. This is an important one as well, and one you might struggle on because, again, you are held to the behavior of your patients on this one. So to meet this measure, more than 5% of unique patients must reach out to you via the electronic messaging function of your certified technology. So again, you're held to the behavior of patients. You have to somehow get them to communicate with you securely using through your patient portal in order to get credit for this. And so again, you get asked all the time, how can I force my patients to communicate with me? So one thing to point out is that the message does not have to be initiated by the patient. So you can reach out to your patient and ask them a question after they've left the office. Reach out to them and with a follow-up question. And when they respond to that question, it counts in this threshold. So again, the message doesn't have to be initiated by them. Another great thing that counts for this measure is med refill requests through your patient portal. Those would count too. So another reason to have med refill requests, having that functionality available through your patient portal, is that any of those med refill requests by your patients will count in the 5% measure as well. All right, on to the 6 menu measures. Again, I'm going to cruise through these. I have too many slides to cover yet, and I want to leave time for the multitude of questions that have come in. Syndromic surveillance. This was the only measure that was a menu measure in stage 1 and stayed a menu measure in stage 2. Although, just like with the MICR measure, the stage 2 requirement is going from testing your system's ability to actual live production, where you're actually sending on a continuing basis your syndromic surveillance data. That is what the stage 2 measure requires. Again, I'm going to cover there's some caveats there. There's actually 4 different ways that you can meet the stage 2 measure for the public health measures, and I'm going to cover those on a slide in just a few minutes here. So the only folks that can be excluded, that are excluded from this particular menu measure are there's 6 provider types that the state does not accept syndromic surveillance information from, and those are podiatrists, dentists, optometrists, ophthalmologists, certified nurse midwives, and chiropractors. So if you're not one of those 6 provider types, you can do syndromic surveillance. And out of all the exclusions that are listed here, there's 4 different ones. What I just mentioned is really the only exclusion for Michigan. So if you're not in a category of providers that collect the ambulatory syndromic surveillance information, that's the only, in Michigan, that's the only exclusion that counts, because syndromic surveillance is alive and well in Michigan. Record electronic notes in patient records. This one is a new measure for stage 2 and is fairly straightforward. If you select this menu measure, you will need to enter progress notes into your EHR for over 30% of unique patients with at least 1 office visit during the reporting period. Note that these progress notes must be created, edited, and signed by the EP. So for anyone who is using a scribe to generate progress notes, this could cause a problem, because anything that the scribe is doing is not going to count. This measure has no exclusions if you choose it. So really, if you're using your EHR in the way that it's made, you're going to be doing these progress notes anyway. So that 30% shouldn't be tough to meet. Imaging results accessible through your certified EHR technology. This is another new addition for stage 2. For over 10% of all tests that yield an image, the test results must be accessible through your EHR. This means either stored directly in the EHR or via a direct link in your EHR to another system like PACS. You can claim an exclusion on this measure if during the reporting period you order less than 100 tests that yield an image or don't have access to electronic imaging results at the start of the reporting period. You can also, another way, you can scan the images into your EHR and it would count as well. Basically, as long as that image is accessible directly in your EHR, or if you have a link embedded directly into your EHR that by one click would pull up that result in a PACS system, that would count. But other than that, you can't leave and go to a PACS system that you then have to log in and search for the patient and pull up that result. That wouldn't count. There has to be kind of a direct link into your EHR, either with that image embedded into the patient's chart, or a link that with one click it'll pop that image open in your PACS system. Or again, you can scan them in and have them count as well. Record patient family history. For this optional measure, you must record family health history for over 20% of your patients, and this history must include 1 or more first-degree relatives. You can only claim an exclusion on this measure if you have no office visits during the reporting period. It's pretty straightforward. There are 2 registry measures now in stage 2. So this one, reporting cancer cases to a public health central cancer registry, As part of the 2014 EHR certification, your EHR has the ability to electronically transmit cancer case info to a public health center cancer registry. For this measure, you must successfully submit this info electronically for the entire reporting period. And there are 4 possible exclusions for this measure, but just like on the other ones, only the first one applies in Michigan because the cancer registry is alive and well. And finally, the menu objective to report specific cases to a specialized registry. This objective is very similar to the previous one involving cancer, only in this measure you're choosing another disease state relevant to your practice and submitting data to a specialized registry associated with that specific disease. Likewise, the exclusions for this measure are similar to the previous one, where only the first one counts in the state of Michigan. And right now, the only other specialized registry offered by the state of Michigan is their birth defects registry. So if you're looking to interface with the state of Michigan in this way, you can do the cancer registry and the birth defects registry. Those are the only ones that the state has up and running right now. All right, as I mentioned, again, a couple more slides here to get through. Public health measures. In stage 2, there are 4 scenarios that could give you credit for achieving ongoing submission. I know this is going to seem kind of strange, but this is true. This slide is right from the state of Michigan, actually. This information is. So in scenario 1, if you meet any of these 4 scenarios, you can attest to yes to meeting the measure for the public health measure. So in scenario 1, submitting the required public health data prior to stage 2 using your technology, and you continue to submit during the during the EP's reporting period. So this is if you're kind of ahead of the pack and you already have ongoing submission. As long as you keep that ongoing submission running through your reporting period, you can attest yes. There's not too many folks in that bucket. Scenario 2, you have to register intent within 60 days of the EP's reporting period and achieved ongoing submission during stage 2 reporting period. So that is getting that ongoing submission running during your reporting period would, of course, allow you to attest yes. It's the next 2 that are kind of strange to me, but they do count. So you still have to register your intent within 60 days of the EP's reporting period. I'm going to touch on that in just a minute as well, on what that means. And then if you are engaged in the required testing and validation process leading to ongoing submission, and the state of Michigan will help you through that and kind of get you to that point. So if you are engaged in the process needed to lead to ongoing submission, you're going to be able to test yes to meeting this measure. And then there's scenario 4, and so scenario 3 is actually where most folks are going to end up falling into in 2015, I suspect. But then there's also scenario 4. You register that intent within 60 days, and then you are awaiting an invitation to engage in the required testing and validation process. Not too many folks are going to be in that. The state of Michigan has a nice process in place for the onboarding with this, and they're actively working to get providers onboarded. So, but folks are most likely either going to fall into scenario 3, and hopefully many will achieve scenario 2 in 2015 as well, where you actually get that ongoing submission going. But it is not actually a requirement to attest to yes, as long as you can reach one of these 4 scenarios. So what does that registering intent within 60 days mean? There's a requirement in Meaningful Use that you have to register your intent for ongoing submission to the state of Michigan within 60 days of the start of your reporting period. So if we are in a 365-day reporting period, basically by the end of February, you have to have done this. Of course, that'll change if we go back down to a quarterly reporting period. But here's what you need to do to register that intent. I've kind of spelled out. So if you didn't complete any of the testing in stage 1, you bypassed these measures in stage 1 and now are looking to start from scratch in stage 2. Go to pull up this tip sheet. There's a lot of information you have to enter, but by completing this tip sheet and getting that sent in to the state of Michigan, you will have registered your intent. If you've completed the public health testing in stage 1, for MICR, you just have to send an email notification to this email address I have listed here to register your intent. And then sites will receive an email confirmation from the state of Michigan within a couple weeks. And for syndromic surveillance, technically a successful a stage 1 test automatically registered your intent, so you're okay. But the state of Michigan would like you to send an email to the address I have listed here to alert them that that the EP is beginning the stage 2 work. So it's not actually a requirement in meaningful use. It's more just what the state of Michigan would like you to do is send a quick email to let them know that the EP is going into stage 2 and is going to be working on that ongoing submission. Running out of time. And then for the other two, the cancer registry and specialized registry, these are new measures, so no one, everyone is kind of starting from scratch. So go back to that previous slide, that first tip sheet there. It needs to be completed for cancer registry and specialized registry in order to register your intent within 60 days. And then the state of Michigan has a great website here with a lot of good information on it, well put together on their public health reporting page. So any other information, you can go there. Real quick, clinical quality measures. I'm not going to spend a lot of time here. Just know that clinical quality measures are a part of stage 2, just like they were in stage 1. But they might have, they might be different, especially if you use the flex options and reattested to a 2013 version of meaningful use. Just know that in 2014, clinical quality measures changed. So in prior years, you might have reported 6 out of a possible 44 CQMs, but in 2014, you're reporting on 9 out of 64. So things have changed. And then likewise, your CQMs have to, the ones that you choose, have to cover 3 of these 6 NQS domains. So you have to be very cognizant of the CQMs that you are choosing. When you choose your 9, make sure you're hitting at least 3 of these 6 buckets. And some more information on CQMs. So real quick, last slide before I get to questions that I don't have time for. So what do I need in place on day 1? So key items to have set on January 1st. Again, this is only if we are stuck with that 365-day reporting period. You have to be on certified technology. Hopefully you're on your 2014 version, but you have to at least be on certified technology. So that can be your 2011 certified technology. But the best practice is to be on your 2014 version because you need that increased functionality running because you're on the hook for a lot of difficult numerators to achieve, and in some cases you can't do it. You can't hit those on 2011 technology. So get your 2014 technology up and running. You need to make sure that your CDS rules are enabled. So prior to January 1st, you need to make sure you need to choose which CDS rules. Remember, you have 5 of them that you have to have enabled. So those have to be enabled for the entire reporting period. You have to be ready to have those turned on January 1st. All your yes/no measures, as I call them, need to be enabled, like your drug formularies, your drug and drug allergy checks. Make sure that all those are turned on as of January 1st. You're going to be able to. You have to prove that those are enabled for the entire reporting period. You want to identify your menu measures so that more you just know what those targets are and can get workflows in place if any workflows need to be changed prior to January 1st so that you can start off in a good place on January 1st and are able to start knocking down those numerators. Lab interface up and running, if applicable, is certainly the easiest way to get your lab results into your EHR. So work on getting the lab interfaces up if you can, and then communicate with your vendor on any upgrade timelines. If everything is not in place yet, hound your vendors to get them where you need them to be, and fully understand where and when any upgrades are coming. And so not being prepared could easily stop you from a testing in 2015. So if you don't have all of the stuff in place, let's say you don't have your CDS rules enabled on January 1st, you can't be a meaningful user in 2015 on a full year-long reporting because these are things that have to be in place for the entire reporting period. So missing one little thing could create a big mess in 2015 for you. All right, we are at 1 o'clock. I have a whole bunch of questions here that I apologize I don't have time to address during this broadcast. But I am going to, we have them all logged here, and I am going to reach out to each one of you individually and get these answered. I apologize that I did not have time before 1 o'clock for these. And unfortunately, we cannot run long today. So with that, I'm going to turn this over to Leslie and for any closing comments.
Yeah, thank you, Bruce. It was great to go through all of that detailed information, and like Bruce mentioned, he'll be reaching out to you all individually who've asked questions, and you can always give us a call if we didn't cover something and you weren't able to ask a question.
My email is there too, so if you have any questions following that, feel free to email me. I'm happy to answer any questions you have.
And just for future planning, if you're interested in attending our January webinar, we are planning to do it on Wednesday, January 14th, again at noon, like usual. And we're going to be covering the public health measures, both in all stages, exactly what you need to do, what steps you need to take. I know Bruce briefly went over it here, but we're going to have one of our experts who works on a lot of the registries at the state help us out with the exact steps of what you need to do and what the measures detail in order to attest. So join us for that, and otherwise we appreciate you attending, and we hope you have a great day.
Thank you.